You think money can buy souls, Camila? His voice cracked, trembling under the weight of cameras flashing around them. She stood frozen, one hand clutching her stomach, the other gripping the conference table as reporters shouted. The words, billionaire scandal, and visa bribe echoed like bullets in her ears. Her board members stared, betrayal, disgust, disbelief. And somewhere, beneath all the noise, Elijah's eyes met hers, not with anger, but heartbreak. That was the moment everything she built began to crumble. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Globe showing Europe, Africa, United States, Canada, UK, Australia, Jamaica. Camila Hargrove was the kind of woman Detroit whispered about but never really knew. Her face was on business magazines, her name on skyscrapers, and her money on every deal that mattered. Hargrove Industries controlled half the state's commercial real estate, yet her mansion in Bloomfield Hills was quieter than a graveyard. Every morning, she drove her black Range Rover through the cold gray streets of Michigan, her reflection sharp in the tinted glass. Flawless, powerful, untouchable. But that image was a lie. Behind the glass walls of her office, Camila's world had grown painfully small. The long conference tables, the rehearsed smiles, the endless calls, all of it meant nothing the moment she closed her door at night. She had no husband, no family dinners, no one waiting for her. And after years of chasing everything she thought would fill her life, she was left with a secret that burned every time she looked in the mirror. She couldn't have children. Not naturally. Not anymore. Downstairs, after the executives had gone home, the building belonged to the forgotten, the night workers, janitors, and cleaning staff who made her empire shine again by morning. Among them was Elijah Brooks, a 29-year-old immigrant working 3 jobs just to stay afloat. He moved through those marble halls like a ghost, mop in hand, quiet and invisible to everyone except the other cleaners. Elijah didn't belong in this world of glass and gold, yet he walked it every night. His worn-out sneakers squeaked against the polished floors, his gloves soaked with the same cleaning solution that burned his hands raw. He'd left Jamaica 5 years earlier chasing opportunity, but Detroit had offered him little more than exhaustion and cold. The only thing that kept him going was his younger sister, Naomi, who was still waiting for her visa approval, and the fear that any day his own could be denied. One night, as snow slammed against the windows, Camila stayed late in her office reviewing quarterly losses. She barely noticed the faint humming sound from the janitor's cart outside. But then, a voice drifted through the crack of her door, tired, frustrated, but soft. Elijah was on the phone. He thought no one could hear him. They said it again, man. Immigration's holding it up. I might lose the permit. If they send me back. His voice broke slightly. I can't let that happen. Something inside Camila shifted. It wasn't pity, she didn't know how to feel pity anymore, but something about his tone, the quiet panic of someone cornered by a system that didn't care, struck deeper than she expected. That night, when Elijah accidentally knocked over a trash bin outside her door, she stepped out for the first time and saw him up close. His eyes carried exhaustion, not laziness. His silence, not ignorance. She didn't thank him or apologize. She just stared for a moment longer than she should have before walking away. Days passed, but that voice lingered. Camila began noticing him, the way he stayed late to polish the same floors twice, how he kept his uniform neat despite the stains, how he read worn library books during his break. For someone she'd have never noticed a month ago, Elijah had become a quiet reminder that there was still something raw and real in a world that only cared about power. Then came the night her doctor called. Another test, another rejection. I'm sorry, Ms. Hargrove. It's no longer viable. The words hit her harder than she'd admit. Alone in her office, surrounded by awards and glass trophies, she realized how meaningless it all felt. That was when an idea, irrational, desperate, began to form. Camila had spent her entire life buying what she wanted. Control was her currency. So, in her broken logic, maybe she could buy this too. A child, a legacy, something to belong to her. When she saw Elijah cleaning the executive floor again, her heart beat faster. She didn't see his uniform or his status, she saw possibility. The kind of man whose humility didn't come from weakness but from surviving things she couldn't imagine. It was wrong. Unthinkable. But the thought didn't leave. And that Friday night, while Elijah prepared to leave, Camila called out from her office door, her voice colder than her trembling hands. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "I have a proposition for you." She didn't tell him everything that night. Just the beginning. That she knew about his visa troubles. That she could fix them. That she needed something in return. Something personal. Elijah's silence was deafening. His eyes widened in disbelief, maybe disgust, maybe shock, but he didn't walk away. Because when a person is cornered by life, morality becomes a luxury. If you've ever been pushed to make a choice that felt wrong, not because you wanted to, but because the world gave you no other option, then you understand him. That's why people like you stay with stories like this. Not for the money, not for the scandal, but for the truth behind what desperation really does to a person. That night, Elijah didn't give her an answer. But the next morning, when he returned for his shift, Camila found a note slipped under her office door. 3 words. Simple. Heavy. "Tell me more." And with that, the line between business and humanity began to blur. Camila Hargrove didn't sleep that night. Those 3 words, "Tell me more," echoed through her head like a heartbeat she didn't want to admit was there. She'd spent her entire life making deals, but never one like this. There were contracts, lawyers, negotiations, things she could control. But this was different. This one felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, not knowing if she'd jump or be pushed. By morning, her mind was already made up. Camila didn't do hesitation. She built empires by turning fear into plans. So when Elijah arrived that evening, still wearing his janitor's uniform, she was ready, or at least she thought she was. He stood just inside her office doorway, awkward but composed, the faint smell of cleaning solvent clinging to his gloves. Camila gestured toward the leather chair across from her desk. He didn't sit. She explained in the only way she knew how, direct, clinical, transactional. She wanted a child. She'd already explored every medical route. Adoption wasn't an option. Her public profile made that process nearly impossible without scrutiny. She needed discretion, certainty. And in exchange, she'd ensure his visa was not just extended, but converted to permanent residency. She'd also provide a financial guarantee, one that could set his sister's life up too. She expected him to react with disgust, or shock, or anger. Instead, Elijah said nothing for a long time. His gaze stayed low, as if searching the floor for a moral compass that had long gone missing. He finally asked one question, not about the money, not about her motives, but about the child. What happens when it grows up? Camila didn't have an answer. For a woman who'd built her world on power and certainty, she suddenly found herself terrified of a future she couldn't script. But she lied anyway. She said everything would be fine. That it would all be handled. Elijah nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. And that was it. The deal was made in silence. The following week, Camila's lawyers drafted an agreement that would make any ordinary person nauseous, legally binding, airtight, emotionally empty. Elijah signed it with a shaking hand. He didn't ask for more time. He didn't even ask for mercy. He just signed and left, shoulders tense, eyes distant. After that, things between them became mechanical. Discreet appointments. Medical arrangements. Everything hidden under strict confidentiality. Camila made sure every detail was covered, her assistants clueless, her personal doctor sworn to secrecy. But what Camila didn't expect, what she couldn't prepare for, was how much the arrangement would change her. She started noticing things she'd never cared about before, the smell of disinfectant in the hallways, the worn creases in Elijah's uniform, the exhaustion behind his calm eyes. She noticed that he never complained, never missed a shift, even when snow turned Detroit into a sheet of white ice. And somewhere between the appointments, the quiet drives, and the silence that filled the spaces between them, something fragile began to grow. Not romance, not yet, but awareness. One night, while waiting for the doctor, Elijah admitted he hadn't told his sister. "She wouldn't understand," he said. "She already thinks I'm losing myself here." Camila understood that feeling too well. Losing yourself in survival was something she'd mastered long ago. But no one can make a deal with life without paying its emotional tax. The guilt crept in quietly for Elijah. Every time he cleaned the executive floor, he saw her reflection in the glass doors, the billionaire whose name was etched on every wall, and wondered if he'd traded too much of his soul for the chance to stay in America. Camila, on the other hand, began to lose the very control she worshipped. For years she had dictated the terms of everything: business, people, outcomes, but Elijah's quiet decency disarmed her. He didn't flatter her. He didn't fear her. He didn't want anything more than what was agreed. And that was exactly what made her feel something she hadn't felt in years: vulnerability. By the end of February, she knew the process was working. Her doctor confirmed it. Early stages. Hope, the kind she'd buried long ago, returned in cautious whispers. She didn't tell anyone, not even Elijah. She just sat in her office late one night, hand resting lightly on her stomach, realizing that for the first time, something inside her was alive that wasn't driven by ambition or power. But peace, as it always does, didn't last. Rumors started to swirl in the building. A few employees noticed the odd timing of her late-night visits. Her executive assistant whispered to a friend about a strange man from maintenance seen leaving her floor after hours. Detroit's business gossip circles were merciless and quick. Still, Camila thought she could contain it. She'd contained everything else in her life. Until one evening, as she exited the parking garage, a sleek black sedan blocked her way. From it stepped Ethan Ward, her ex-fiancé, a powerful corporate lawyer who once helped build her empire before she left him at the altar. The kind of man who never forgot humiliation, especially when it came from a woman richer than him. He leaned on her window, smirking. "Heard you've been busy," he said through the glass. "Funny, you never liked charity work before?" Camila's blood ran cold. How did he know? The next day, photos surfaced online, blurry but recognizable. Her entering a private clinic. Elijah in the background, head lowered, holding the door. By Monday morning, gossip sites were calling it the Hargrove scandal. Her PR team panicked. Her board demanded explanations. Elijah's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Immigration lawyers warned him to lay low. Everything they'd built, every secret, every lie, began to crack. But what none of them knew yet was that Ethan wasn't just stirring rumors. He was preparing something worse. Something that would destroy both their lives in one move. A week later, Elijah opened his work locker to find an anonymous envelope. Inside was a printed photo of Camila at her last medical appointment, and a single line typed beneath it: "If you don't tell them everything, I will." The anonymous envelope burned in Elijah's hands like a warning from fate itself. He'd been cleaning the maintenance room at Hargrove Industries when he found it, tucked inside his locker, perfectly centered as if someone had placed it there to be discovered. He opened it with trembling fingers, and when he saw the photo, Camila stepping out of the discreet women's clinic, her coat wrapped tightly around her frame, his stomach dropped. Whoever took that picture knew too much. The typed message beneath it, "If you don't tell them everything, I will," left no question about the intent. Someone was watching. Someone wanted this entire secret dragged into daylight. Elijah wasn't built for secrets. His whole life had been about honesty, about working hard for scraps of dignity that no one ever gave freely. Yet now, here he was, part of something that could end a billionaire's career, expose a private deal that was never meant to exist, and shatter what little normalcy he had left. He didn't go to work the next morning. He couldn't face the polished marble floors, the quiet hum of wealth, or the whispers that always seemed to echo louder when he passed by. Instead, he took a bus to Belle Isle Park, the one place in Detroit where he could breathe. The air was cold, sharp, and clean. Families walked by with hot chocolate in hand, kids laughing, dogs tugging at leashes. For a moment, it reminded him of why he came to this country. Not for money, not even for safety, but for the chance to belong. He sat on a bench by the water and thought about Camila, not the billionaire, not the woman in tailored suits, but the person who had looked away when she told him she wanted a child. The one who, beneath her control, had something broken and human inside her. That night, when he finally checked his phone, he had 7 missed calls, all from her. The last voicemail was short, her voice shaking. "Elijah, we need to talk. Please." When he arrived at her penthouse, she was standing by the window, the city lights reflecting off her glass of untouched wine. Her face looked harder than usual, but her eyes gave her away. She'd seen it too, the photo, the message. Camila had dealt with corporate threats before, hostile takeovers, lawsuits, smear campaigns, but this was different. This wasn't just her reputation at stake. This was personal. And it wasn't just about her anymore. They spent hours arguing over what to do, whether to deny it, bury it, or run from it. But in the end, Camila decided to stay quiet. "If I react," she said, "I'll make it worse." That's how they win fear. Elijah knew she was right, but fear doesn't disappear because you reason with it. It lingers. It festers. 2 days later, he was called into HR. Someone had filed an anonymous misconduct report against him. They didn't accuse him outright, but they hinted that his inappropriate proximity to upper management had been noted. His badge access was temporarily suspended, pending review. It was clear someone was coming after him now, too. When he left the office that day, the winter wind cut like glass. He passed by a newsstand with a magazine headline that read, "Detroit's Queen of Steel Under Fire, Camila Hargrove's Secret." The photo was the same one from the envelope. Blurred, cropped, but unmistakable. He froze in place, staring at it until the vendor told him to move along. That night, he got another message, this time a text. "Meet me. Midnight. Pier 7. No name, no signature. Just that. It could have been anyone. The blackmailer, Ethan, or someone trying to scare him off. But something in Elijah's gut told him that running wouldn't make it stop. So he went. Pier 7 was quiet, the kind of forgotten corner of the Detroit River where fog swallows everything. A single car sat at the edge of the dock. A black sedan, engine running, headlights slicing through the mist. When the driver's window rolled down, Elijah's heart dropped. It was Ethan Ward. Ethan didn't threaten him directly, not at first. He talked like a lawyer, smooth and cold. He said there were ways to make things disappear, and that Camila was too valuable to destroy. Then he slid a folder across the hood of his car. Inside was another document, a non-disclosure agreement and a check for $250,000. "If you care about her," Ethan said, "you'll sign this and walk away. Leave Michigan. Start over somewhere else. She'll recover. You won't." For a long moment, Elijah said nothing. Then he tore the check in half, right in front of him. That was the first time Ethan's mask cracked. He smiled, not in amusement, but in warning. "You have no idea who you're protecting." He drove away, leaving Elijah alone under the cold fog and the echo of those words. When Elijah got home that night, his phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Camila. "They're going after my board now. I need to see you. Please." He looked at the clock. 1:47 a.m. Somewhere deep inside, he knew their lives had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Sometimes, life tests people who already have too little left to lose. If you've ever stood in silence, protecting someone even when it cost you everything, you understand the kind of choice Elijah faced. Stories like this remind us that loyalty still matters, even when no one's watching. So if you believe in that kind of quiet courage, stay here. This story deserves to be heard. The next morning, Camila's company stock dropped 8% overnight. Her legal team scrambled. Her assistant quit. But worse than all of that, her doctor called. There were complications. And suddenly, everything that had felt like a transaction now felt like a life hanging by a thread. Camila realized she wasn't just fighting for her reputation anymore. She was fighting for a child she hadn't even met, and a man she never meant to care about. Late that night, as the storm battered against her penthouse windows, Camila's phone lit up with a single message from an unknown number. "You think this is about the baby? It's not." The message, "You think this is about the baby? It's not," replayed in Camila's mind all night. By dawn, she hadn't slept a minute. She stood on her balcony overlooking downtown Detroit, the skyline bathed in a pale winter glow. Below, the streets hummed to life, ordinary people heading to work, completely unaware that one of Michigan's most powerful women was watching her life unravel piece by piece. Her phone rang again. It was her head of PR. Another article had dropped, this time with more venom. The story no longer painted her as a scandalous woman chasing motherhood but as an employer exploiting immigrant labor. The words cut deeper than any personal insult could. The one thing Camila had always guarded, her public reputation as a self-made, ethical leader, was now being torn apart by speculation and lies. She knew who was behind it. Ethan Ward. He was methodical, vindictive, and patient. He knew how to destroy reputations without ever lifting a finger. He didn't need to prove anything. He just had to make people doubt. Meanwhile, Elijah had stopped showing up for work entirely. His phone went to voicemail. His apartment was empty when Camila sent her driver to check. It was as if he had vanished. But Elijah hadn't run away. He was hiding in a small motel off the highway near Ann Arbor. He'd taken what little savings he had and disappeared, hoping to buy time. He was scared, not of losing his visa, not even of being exposed, but of being the reason she lost everything. Every news headline, every photo of her on his cracked phone screen reminded him of the mess he had been pulled into. He knew Ethan's type, men who used power like a weapon and money like a leash. He'd met them in every job he ever had, only now one of them had his name on a list. 3 nights later, Camila finally tracked him down. She arrived alone, without security, her coat pulled tight against the snow. The motel was the kind of place where the carpet smelled like smoke and the neon sign flickered half the night. When Elijah opened the door, the sight of her stopped him cold. She looked exhausted, smaller somehow, like the weight of her empire had been peeled away and only the woman underneath remained. She didn't speak right away. Neither did he. Finally, she told him the truth. Ethan wasn't just angry about the broken engagement. He wanted her company, the Hargrove manufacturing division that supplied defense contracts worth millions. When she walked away from him, he lost access to everything. His revenge wasn't about love. It was about legacy. And now he was using Elijah, the easiest target, as leverage to ruin her. She told him about the board threatening to force her out, about the investigation she barely held off, and about the baby, that it was still too early, too risky, and she was terrified. Elijah listened, jaw clenched, silent. Then she asked him the question she'd been avoiding. Did you keep the contract? He nodded. He'd hidden it in a locker at the company, in case anything ever went wrong. Camila's heart sank. That was exactly what Ethan needed. Proof that the deal existed. That night, they drove back to Detroit through a snowstorm, hoping to retrieve it before anyone else could. The streets were empty, their headlights slicing through the flurries as they pulled into the underground garage. Inside, the building was dark except for the faint glow of exit signs. They moved quietly through the maintenance corridor, every sound amplified by the silence. Elijah reached his locker, or what was left of it. The door was pried open, the papers gone. Camila's breath caught in her throat. Then she noticed it, a phone left behind on the bench. Ethan's number flashed across the screen. A video began to play automatically. It was security footage, from her own building. It showed Elijah entering her penthouse weeks ago. No sound, just images. Him handing her a document. Her leaning close. The footage ended abruptly, but it didn't need sound to be damning. The caption below read, "Employee exchanges personal favors for visa and cash. Developing story." Elijah turned away, shame flickering across his face. "He's not stopping," he said quietly. "He won't stop until one of us breaks." Camila felt the walls close in. Her entire life, every careful move, every decision, every shield of professionalism, was now a cage. But for the first time, she didn't care about the company or the headlines. She looked at Elijah and realized something that both terrified and freed her. She didn't want to fight Ethan for revenge. She wanted to fight for something that was hers. Her child. Her truth. Her choice. She made a decision that night, one that would change everything. She called her lawyer and instructed him to prepare a statement for the press. Not a denial, not a rebuttal, a confession. She would tell the world everything. On her terms. But Ethan was one step ahead. As she walked toward her office to prepare her statement, security guards intercepted her. The board had voted her out temporarily, pending investigation. Her access cards deactivated. Her office sealed. She stood there in the hallway, watching as two men in suits walked past her carrying boxes labeled Hargrove Personal Files. Everything she had built was being boxed and erased in real time. And just when she thought she had reached her breaking point, her phone buzzed with a final message from Ethan. "Meet me at the old factory tonight. Alone. Or I release everything." She stared at the text, heart pounding. The old Hargrove factory had been abandoned for years, the first plant her father ever owned, now a hollowed-out ruin on the outskirts of Detroit. Elijah offered to go with her, but she refused. "He wants me," she said quietly. "Not you." When she drove there that night, snow falling in heavy sheets, the roads were empty except for her headlights. The factory loomed in the dark like a skeleton of her past. Inside, the air smelled of rust and oil. Her footsteps echoed through the vast emptiness until she saw him, Ethan, waiting by the broken assembly line, smirking like he had already won. He wasn't holding a weapon. He didn't need to. He held a tablet in his hand. The footage, the documents, the proof. "This is how it ends, Camila," he said. "Either you give me what I want, or I burn everything." She stared at him, the cold biting her skin, the silence so heavy it almost broke her. Then, from the shadows behind them, another voice emerged, calm, steady, defiant. It was Elijah. Ethan's smirk faded as Elijah stepped into the dim light, phone in hand, recording everything. "You've already burned everything," he said quietly. "Now let's see who survives the fire." The old Hargrove factory was silent except for the hum of the snowstorm outside. The air was cold, stale, and heavy with the ghosts of a past that refused to stay buried. Camila stood facing Ethan, every muscle tense. Her empire, her reputation, and her child's future all hung in the balance. And now, from the shadows, Elijah stepped forward, quiet but steady, holding his phone like a truth weapon. Ethan's smirk flickered. "You don't scare me, janitor," he said, his voice low, mocking. Elijah didn't flinch. "You should be scared of the truth," he said. The phone was already recording, its red light glowing faintly in the dark. For once, the tables were turning. Camila watched the two men, one born into power, one who had spent his life scrubbing its floors, standing face to face. She realized then that everything Ethan represented, privilege, manipulation, control, was the very thing she'd spent her career fighting against. She just never realized how deeply it had ruled her until now. Ethan tried to laugh it off. "You think anyone's going to believe your story? You're an illegal immigrant involved in a scandal. She's a disgraced executive. I'm the only one with credibility left." But Elijah didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply turned his phone around, showing Ethan the live feed. Thousands were already watching. The broadcast had gone live on social media, through a public channel that Elijah had prepared earlier, triggered with one click. Everything Ethan had said since she arrived was being streamed in real time. Ethan froze. His confidence cracked. "Keep talking," Elijah said quietly. "Tell them who you really are." Camila's heart raced. The whole world could now see the man who'd been blackmailing her, not the charming lawyer or polished executive, but the vindictive manipulator who'd built his success by preying on others. Ethan lunged toward Elijah, trying to grab the phone, but Camila stepped between them. Her voice, sharp and steady, echoed through the empty factory. "This is what power does when it's afraid of truth." Ethan stopped. For the first time, his eyes betrayed uncertainty, fear even. Moments later, the distant wail of sirens filled the air. The authorities had been alerted, not by Elijah, but by Camila's assistant, who had recognized the signal from the live stream. Within minutes, police lights flashed through the broken factory windows. Ethan tried to run, but there was nowhere left to go. He was arrested on the spot, charged with blackmail, harassment, and extortion. The story broke across Michigan within hours. The man who had once stood beside Camila as her fiancé was now being escorted out of the same empire he once helped build, his reputation in ruins. For Camila, it was over, At least the war that had consumed her. But the scars of it all still ran deep. Over the next several weeks, she disappeared from public view. Her company issued a statement acknowledging the ordeal but refused to sensationalize it. The media moved on quickly, new scandals, new faces, new gossip to feed on. But inside Camila's quiet lakefront home, life had changed in ways she couldn't explain. The baby grew stronger. The doctors were optimistic. She spent her mornings walking along the frozen shoreline, bundled in a heavy coat, hand resting lightly against her stomach. She thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the power, the choices that brought her here. Elijah, meanwhile, had finally received what he had once only dreamed of, his permanent residence. Not because of a deal or an agreement, but because Camila made it right. She hired new legal counsel, not to repay him, but to fix what never should have been transactional in the first place. When he came to see her one afternoon, she was sitting by the window, sunlight reflecting off the lake. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. There was an unspoken understanding between them, that both had saved each other in ways neither expected. Elijah looked around her home, the quiet hum of warmth replacing the chaos of the last few months. "You're really not going back to the company?" he asked finally. Camila shook her head. "I built something powerful," she said softly. "But I forgot to build something meaningful." Instead, she started something new, a non-profit mentorship program for single mothers working in low-income jobs across Michigan. Not a foundation that sought headlines, but a hands-on initiative. She personally hired women who had been overlooked, offering them training, childcare, and fair pay. It wasn't about image anymore. It was about redemption. And yet, in quiet moments, when the snow melted and the lake rippled with spring light, Camila thought of how strange life was, how two people from entirely different worlds could collide in chaos and somehow walk away more human. She often said that Elijah gave her back her sense of purpose. But if you asked him, he'd tell you something different, that she gave him his dignity. Months later, a letter arrived in Elijah's mailbox. It was handwritten, simple, sealed in gold ink. Inside was a birth announcement. A daughter. Helvet. From. No photo. No signature. Just a small note beneath it. "You changed more than one life. See." He smiled, folded the letter carefully, and tucked it away in his wallet. Then he went back to work, not as a janitor, but as the operations manager for the very nonprofit she founded. The same woman who once offered him a deal for survival had become the reason he learned that survival meant nothing without self-worth. And though the world would never know their full story, the late-night conversations, the fear, the small acts of courage, it didn't matter. Some stories don't belong to headlines. They belong to the people who lived them. Sometimes, the most powerful transformations don't happen in boardrooms or through wealth. They happen quietly, between two people who decide to protect something real in a world built on performance. If you've ever learned that your value isn't measured by what you earn or what you own, but by what you stand for, then you already understand what this story was truly about.